Ladies and gentlemen, it's Sitku. Welcome back to another tutorial. We're going to be continuing where we left off with another DFA minimization example. This one's a little bit different though, maybe a tiny bit more complicated. We're going to do the exact same thing we did last time, which is to first tick all combinations on this table where one state is a final state and one state is a non-final state. So for instance, Q0, Q1 won't be ticked because they're both non-finals. Same for Q0, Q2, Q1, Q2, Q0, Q3, Q1, Q3, Q2, Q3. But what about Q0, Q4? Well, Q4 is a final state and Q0 is not. So we will be ticking this. The same goes for Q1, Q4, Q2, Q4, and Q3, Q4. And what about Q5? Well, again, Q0, Q5 is going to be ticked because one is a final state and one isn't. Same goes for Q1, Q5, Q2, Q5, Q3, Q5, but not Q4, Q5, because these are both final states, so they're not different, which means they don't need to be ticked. Now next, we're going to run through all of these again, but this time we're going to check and see if upon taking an input and applying it to both of these states, both of the states in a pair, does the output pair have a tick? Well, let's take a look at Q0, Q1. If we were to input A's into both of these, and remember this DFA, it's a bit different to the last DFA. It has Q0 through Q5 as its states, and it has A and B as its inputs, rather than 0 and 1. So if we were to input an A to Q0, what do we get? We get Q3. An A to Q1 gets us Q3 as well. And Q3, Q3 can't be ticked because there is no box for same state pairs. So this doesn't need to be ticked. But let's check B as well, just in case. Well, B just means Q0 leads to itself and Q1 leads to itself. So seeing as Q0, Q1 is not ticked, it's not going to be ticked. What about Q0, Q2? Well, once again, an A from both of these leads to Q3, and a B from both of these leads to Q0. So a B from Q2 goes to Q0, a B from Q0 goes to Q0, it goes back to itself. So this doesn't need to be ticked either. And Q1, Q2, similarly. Well, again, an A from Q1 and Q2 leads to Q3. A B from Q1 and Q2 leads to Q1 and Q0 respectively. So a B from Q2 again leads to Q0. A B from Q1 leads to Q1. And seeing as Q0 and Q1 are not ticked, they're not checked, we don't need to check this box either. What about Q3, Q0? Well, an A from Q0 leads to Q3. An A from Q3 leads to Q5. And by the way, this was supposed to be a B. Sorry about that. But yeah, an A from Q3 leads to Q5. And Q5 and Q0 are checked. So we do check this one. We don't need to check B at all because we already know Q3, Q0 needs to be checked. What about Q3, Q1? Well, again, an A from Q3 leads to Q5, and an A from Q1 leads to Q3. Q3 and Q5 are checked. yeah, Q3 and Q5, you can see that it's checked right here. So we do check Q1, Q3. And what about Q2, Q3? Once again, an A from Q2 leads to Q3, an A from Q3 leads to Q5. And because Q2, Q5 as a pair, right here we can see that Q2, Q5 is checked. So we do check this box. And the other empty one is Q4, Q5. Well, Q4, given an input of A, goes to Q0. Q5, given an input of A, goes to Q1. Q0, Q1 are not checked as a pair. But what about B? Well, a B from Q5 leads to Q5. A B from Q4 leads to Q5. So this is not going to be checked, because both of these, well, Q4, Q5 is not checked, as we can see here. And Q5, Q5 can't be checked, because Q5 can't pair with Q5, which is what B's from both Q4 and Q5 lead to. They both lead to Q5. While an A from Q4 leads to Q0, an A from Q5 leads to Q1, which means this needs to remain non-checked. Now, just in case, we can check these ones again. Well, Q0, Q1, an A from Q0 goes to Q3, an A from Q1 goes to Q3, again it's not going to be checked. A B from Q1 goes to itself, a B from Q0 goes to itself, again it's not going to be checked. And what about Q2? Once again, an A from Q2 leads to Q3, an A from Q1 leads to Q3, a B from Q2 leads to Q0, a B from Q0 leads to Q0, so Q0, Q2 is not going to be checked. And it's the exact same situation for Q1, Q2, because a B from Q2 leads to Q0, a B from Q1 leads to itself, Q0, Q1 is not checked, and an A from both of them once again leads to Q3, which means these aren't going to be checked. So now what do we have? Well, Q0, Q1 is unchecked, so let's circle these. Q0, Q2 is unchecked, so let's circle these. And also Q2, Q1 is unchecked, so we circle these. Now what does this mean? Well, let's just make that circle a bit better. So what does this mean? Well, it means that all three of these are going to be in the same state. They've all got the same transitions, so they've got identical transitions effectively. So when these are in the same state, we're going to have the exact same result as if they were in separate states. And what about Q4, Q5? Well, these are also going to be in the same state. So we can draw a circle around those two. Now, let's make one state for Q0, Q1, Q2. Let's make another state for Q4, Q5. And another one for Q2, as well as another one for Q3. Let's label these. So Q0, this is going to be a bit slow, so bear with me. Q1. Hopefully I'm getting an electronic drawing pad soon, so it should speed up a bit then. Q1 and Q2. And then we've got Q3 here. So why did I have another one here? Well, we don't need this one. We don't need this last one. So let's just quickly edit this out. Just a second. Well, let me use an eraser. I'm still learning how to use this properly, so sorry about that. Let's make our color black again. And let's go back to the pencil. Okay, we should be fine. So we've got Q0, Q1, Q2, Q3, and then we need a combination of Q4 and Q5. Okay, and while we're at it, we might as well erase this and put it somewhere closer to the center. Make things make a bit more sense. So we need to shift back to the pencil. Okay. And let's label it once more. Okay. Now let's put down our lines. Well, we're going to have something from these to Q3, and we're going to have something from Q3 to Q4, Q5, aren't we? And what else are we going to have? Well, we're going to have something else coming out of Q0, Q1, Q2. We have to, don't we? Because every state is going to have an A and a B coming out of it. So let's draw one extra line for each of these. Actually, Q3 doesn't, because as you'll note, Q3 is going to have both A and B coming out of the same line. And let's have this one as well. And again, this one's going to need, Q4, Q5 is going to need a line over to Q0, Q1, Q2. And well, why is all of this? Let's take a look in just a second after I've done these. Okay, so Q4, Q5 has something going into itself. What is that? Well, a B from Q4 leads to Q5, and a B from Q5 leads to Q5. So a B in both cases leads to something in Q4, Q5. And before we forget, we need to make sure that this is the final state. Okay, because Q4 and Q5 are final states. That means that their combination is also going to be a final state. So now Q4, Q5, a B from Q4 or Q5 leads back to Q4 or Q5. You can think of it that way. So we can jot down a B right here. Now what leads from Q4, Q5? Well, where does an A lead from Q4, Q5? Well, A leads to Q1 from Q5, and it leads to Q0 from Q4. So in any case, an A is going to lead to the state Q0, Q1, Q2. That looks terrible. Let me redraw that. Okay. Still not great, but just bear with me. So what about from Q0, Q1, Q2? Well, from Q1, a B leads to itself. From Q0, a B leads to itself. And what about Q2? Well, a B leads to Q0. So you guessed it, a B is going to lead straight back to Q0, Q1, Q2, because a B from any of these three, leads back to one of these three. That's all you need to think about. And what about an A? An A from Q0 leads to Q3, an A from Q1 leads to Q3, and an A from Q2 leads to Q3. So conveniently, all three of these lead to the same state. Well, not conveniently, we already worked out that these three states have equivalent transitions, and combining them will lead to the same DFA. So it's not so convenient, but at the same time it is convenient that this is such a nice minimizable DFA. What about Q3? Well, an A from Q3 leads to Q5, and a B from Q3 leads to Q4. So an A and a B is going to lead to the state Q4, Q5. So regardless of whether we get an A or a B as an input from Q3, we're going to transition to the new state, the new final state that we've created, which is Q4, Q5. And you can check this, and you will get the exact same results as this larger DFA. So this smaller DFA that can take up less space, it's more efficient. It will accept the exact same language that this larger DFA does. Right, so I hope you enjoyed this DFA minimization example. We probably won't do much more on DFAs, or on DFA minimization at least. We may look at DFAs a bit more. But anyway, I'll see you next time, and thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.